Hi everyone, I'm Paige Abbott, and this is your weekly recovery message on the topic of fantasy. So this is the last part 4 of the series that I've been doing on relationships over the last 4 weeks. And I previously explored different types of relationship patterns, the autonomous or avoidant style of relationships, enmeshment in relationships, and interdependent, which is the healthy version of relationships that we're working towards. The reason that I wanted to end off the series on relationships with this topic of fantasy is that there's so much fantasy involved with addiction, and especially addiction involving relationships. So it's very important to start to be aware of this idea that the disease of addiction will feed into and will generate these unrealistic, fantastical ideas of what relationships should be, or even what they actually are. So the disease can distort and cloud the filter to the extent that your perception of what's really happening in a relationship may not be an accurate representation of reality. So for instance, the fantasy version may be that my relationship with my romantic partner is completely loving, it's over the top, affectionate, understanding, respectful, whereas in reality, perhaps your partner is quite distant, they're avoidant, at times maybe verbally or emotionally abusive, they're not able to share or connect with you at the feeling of emotion, they're having anger outbursts or temper tantrums, and this is the distortion that can happen, that until people can pull back from that and see how fantasy has been clouding their perception, they're living in this fantasy that all is well and good. Probably as you're listening to this, you're thinking, well, if this distortion is in my brain, then how do I ever gain clarity on reality? And the essential steps are you need to start talking about what's actually happening in your relationships, as well as the expectations that you're carrying for relationships generated by your mind. So sharing those with other people and starting to write them down and journal them so that you have clarity as well on what messages is your brain telling you about what you're looking for in relationships. So if you're starting to journal, then you can start to talk with other people, and I would recommend either peers in recovery and or professionals who are familiar with addiction involving relationships to really start fleshing out where is fantasy and where is reality. And it's also important to keep in mind that as you start moving away from fantasy and into a more realistic appreciation of what's happening, there can be this feeling almost like a bubble bursting. And it can feel quite devastating, and the mind can start catastrophizing that now the relationship is all bad, it's terrible, there's nothing there worth salvaging, which likely isn't the case either. It's just gaining that realistic appreciation of what's working in the relationship and where does continued work need to be done. Because that's the reality for any individual as well as any relationship, is that there's always a combination of things that are going well and things that need to continue to be refined. That's the whole point of the human experience and personal growth and development, is that we're always evaluating where we're doing well and where we need to keep moving forward. And this is no different in the realm of moving from fantasy into reality. So again, if feelings of catastrophization, anxiety, despair, sadness are coming up, it's important to feel those feelings and also be talking about those feelings, again, to make sure that your brain isn't pulling you into some unrealistic fantasy about now how terrible the relationship is, rather than staying in that realistic place in between. So I hope that you've enjoyed the series on relationships. This certainly will not be the end of my discussion on the topic of relationships, because it's one that comes up time and time again in the work that we do here. But I hope you've enjoyed this concentrated dosage on the issues of relationships, and today with fantasy. I'll see you next week, and in the meantime, I wish you the best in your ongoing recovery. Thanks for watching.